In a fake relationship, Emma and Jake's growing feelings blur the lines between truth and pretense. As tension rises and secrets surface, they must confront their emotions and face the reality of their connection. Will love triumph, or will fear tear them apart? Discover the unexpected twist that changes everything. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. It all started as a game. Two strangers, a made-up relationship, and a simple challenge. Pretend to be in love for the sake of others. What could go wrong? At first it felt harmless, a harmless little lie that no one would ever suspect. But as the days went by, something unexpected began to happen. The lines between reality and pretense started to blur. What was once a performance became something real, something powerful, something neither of them could control. Meet Emma and Jake. They were just two people thrown together by circumstance, bound by an agreement that was never meant to go beyond the surface. But as they spent more time together, laughter became easier, glances held a little more meaning, and the pretend moments began to feel too real. Emma never expected this, and Jake, he certainly didn't either. Now they're caught in a web of emotions they never saw coming. Is it possible that what started as fake love has turned into something more? Or are they just falling deeper into a lie they've created for themselves? As the days unfold, secrets start to surface and feelings become tangled. Will they be able to keep pretending? Or will the truth eventually come crashing down? Stay tuned as the twists and turns of this unexpected romance unfold. You won't believe what happens next. Emma never thought she'd be in a situation like this. She had always kept her heart guarded, built walls around herself after past heartbreaks. Love to her was a risk she wasn't willing to take again. So when the opportunity to fake a relationship came up, it seemed like the perfect solution. It was just a temporary arrangement, a way to get through the awkward family gatherings and social events. Nothing more. But as she spent more time with Jake, she started noticing things about him that made her heart skip a beat. The way he smiled, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Was it just part of the act, or was there something real hidden beneath the surface? Jake, on the other hand, was struggling with a completely different dilemma. He had never believed in love, not after the betrayal he'd faced in the past. To him, this fake relationship was just a convenient distraction, nothing that could ever turn into something more. But Emma was different. He could tell she wasn't like the others. There was something about her, something vulnerable and real, that made him want to stay close. The more they pretended, the harder it became to separate the lies from the truth. He started wondering if he had already fallen for her without even realizing it. With every passing day, the lines between truth and fiction grew more tangled. They both tried to push their feelings aside, but the connection between them was undeniable. As the pressure built, so did the fear. Fear of what would happen if they admitted the truth, or worse, what would happen if they didn't. As days turned into weeks, Emma began to notice subtle shifts in Jake's behavior. He wasn't the detached, unemotional guy he had been when they first started this relationship. There were moments when their hands brushed, and it felt electric, charged with an intensity neither of them could ignore. Emma had to admit to herself that her feelings for him were becoming harder to control. But she was terrified. She had promised herself she wouldn't fall for someone again, especially not someone like Jake, someone with walls just as high as hers. Yet every time they shared a quiet moment, her resolve started to weaken. Jake, too, found himself trapped in a web of his own making. He had always kept his heart closed off, convinced that love was a fantasy for others. But with Emma, everything felt different. The more time they spent together, the more he found himself craving her presence, her smile, the sound of her laugh. It was confusing, terrifying even. He hadn't expected to care, but now he couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if they admitted the truth to each other. What would it mean for them? What would it mean for the facade they had built? Complicating everything were the people around them, friends, family, who believed in their perfect relationship. Complicating everything were the people around them, friends, family, who believed in their perfect relationship. They saw what was happening, but neither Emma nor Jake had the courage to expose the cracks. The pressure was mounting. Emma found herself asking, Was this all just a game to him? Or had they both crossed a line they couldn't turn back from? And Jake, overwhelmed with guilt and confusion, started to wonder if he could ever be honest with her and with himself. The more Emma tried to push her feelings aside, the more they seemed to creep up on her. Every conversation with Jake felt like a tug of war between the truth and the lie they were living. She couldn't keep pretending anymore, not when her heart was so undeniably tied to him. Yet fear held her back. If she admitted how she felt, what would that mean for their fake relationship? Would it all fall apart? Would he laugh at her for being so foolish? What if deep down he didn't feel the same way? Jake, too, was growing restless. His mind raced as he tried to come to terms with the emotions he had been hiding. The pressure was suffocating. He had always been good at keeping his feelings buried. But this was different. Every time he looked at Emma, every time she laughed, every time their eyes met, he felt a pull, a connection he couldn't ignore. But would she still want him if he told her the truth? Could he trust her with his heart after everything he'd been through? The walls he had built around himself were cracking, and he was terrified of what would happen if they crumbled completely. It was becoming unbearable. The pretending, the lies, it was all too much. The tension between them was palpable, and everyone around them could sense it. Friends whispered, family exchanged knowing looks. Everyone could see the truth except the two of them. The inevitable was closing in, and neither of them knew how to stop it. Would they risk everything to finally face the truth, or would they let the chance slip away forever? One evening, as they sat together on a quiet bench in the park, the tension between them was unbearable. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to find the right words, but every time she opened her mouth, the fear of being vulnerable held her back. She glanced at Jake, his eyes distant, as though he too was battling an internal war. The weight of everything they hadn't said hung between them. Jake couldn't take it anymore. He had to know. Did she feel the same way? Or was this all just an act to her? His emotions, which he had kept so tightly controlled, began to unravel. He leaned in slightly, his voice low, but the intensity was undeniable. "Emma, what are we doing? This isn't real, is it?" Emma froze, her mind racing. She had to answer him, but could she? Could she admit to him and to herself that everything had changed? That this was no longer a game? The moment felt suspended in time, and she knew that whatever happened next would change everything. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, something interrupted their moment, leaving both of them hanging on the edge of a cliff, unsure of which way to fall. Just as Emma opened her mouth to respond, a phone rang, shattering the tension between them. It was Jake's phone. He stared at it for a moment, his face falling as he read the name on the screen. His expression hardened, and he quickly answered, his voice a mix of irritation and reluctance. "What is it?" he said, his eyes flicking to Emma, who felt a sudden knot tighten in her stomach. It was his ex-girlfriend. Emma could tell from the one-sided conversation that she was asking about their relationship. The words they exchanged were clipped, uncomfortable, and Emma's heart sank. The walls Jake had built up all this time were cracking wide open, but not in the way she had hoped. When the call ended, Jake turned to her, guilt and confusion clouding his eyes. He began, but Emma cut him off, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me about her?" Her words were filled with hurt, not anger. She realized then that she had been waiting for him to take the first step, but instead he had been holding on to a past she didn't even know existed. Before he could answer, Emma stood up. "I can't do this," she said, walking away. And just as she turned the corner, her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. "It's time to tell the truth." Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the message. She knew something had shifted, but now everything felt even more uncertain. She tried to shake it off, but the thought of Jake's unfinished words and the lingering tension made it impossible to ignore. What was the truth? Who was the one hiding something now? She met Jake the next day, both of them visibly exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. There were no words at first, just an unspoken understanding that things had to change. Emma knew she had to let go of her fear. Jake, too, realized he could no longer hide behind his walls. The truth wasn't something to be afraid of. It was something they both needed to face. Slowly, they began to open up to each other, peeling away the layers of doubt, confusion, and past baggage. As the days passed, they found themselves growing closer, not just in love, but in trust. They learned that real relationships weren't built on perfection or pretending. They were built on honesty and vulnerability. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of doubt, but they faced them together. And as for the mysterious message, Emma never replied because she didn't need to. She had already found the truth within herself, and in Jake too. They were finally ready to live their real love,